Patricia Gibson for the SNP.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I wish to begin, as others have, by congratulating the Honourable Member for Bath for bringing this debate forward once again in Eating Disorders Awareness Week, and I'm very glad to once again participate in that debate, as I have done in the past. And in previous years, when I've participated in this debate, I always begin by pointing out that I first became aware of eating disorder conditions in the 1980s when Karen Carpenter died. And then in 1999, again when Lean Zavaroni died. Both women had struggled with eating disorders for a number of years and sadly succumbed to them when they ought to have had so many years ahead of them. Similarly, we have an estimated 1.25 million people across the UK in a similar struggle. Eating disorders, as we've heard, are no respecters of age, ethnicity, gender or background. Indeed, a quarter of those with eating disorders are men. The mortality rate is high, especially for those with anorexia, which has the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, and with 1 in 6 people with binge eating disorder attempting to end their lives. Other mental health challenges can often accompany eating disorders, such as depression, self-harm, anxiety, and obsessive behaviours. Because eating is fundamental to survival, those with eating disorders typically develop severe physical health problems. But we know that with the right support and treatment, we can change lives, and early intervention provides the best chance for recovery. Eating Disorder Awareness Week this year seeks to highlight avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or ARFID, a relatively new term. And this is different from other restrictive eating disorders in that it describes a pattern of eating that avoids certain foods or food groups entirely and or is restricted in quantity. Sometimes those with it eat very, very small amounts. Avoidant and restrictive eating is not related to a lack of available food or cultural norms or even fasting for religious reasons. And it's not related to a person's view of their body shape, and it's not related to a specific purpose, such as losing weight. And it doesn't feature some of the other behaviours that can be associated with anorexia, bulimia, such as over-exercising. ARFID is often dismissed as picky eating, but the crucial difference between what we might call a picky eater and a child with ARFID is that a picky eater won't starve themselves to death. A child with ARFID very well might. Whilst the exact causes of ARFID are unknown, it is thought that people who develop it do so because of sensory sensitivity, fear of negative consequences, or a lack of interest in eating. For example, they might be very sensitive to the taste, texture, or appearance of certain types of food, or have had a distressing experience with food, such as choking, vomiting, infant acid reflux, or other gastrointestinal conditions. And this may cause the person to develop feelings of fear and anxiety around food, leading them to avoid it. And it doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone of any age, including even babies, and can be diagnosed in children as young as 3 years old. Now, researchers know much less about what puts someone at risk of developing ARFID, but it's been discovered that people with autism spectrum conditions are much more likely to develop this condition, as are those with ADHD and intellectual disabilities. In addition, children who don't outgrow what we might call normal picky eating, or in whom picky eating is severe, appear to be more likely to develop ARFID. And many children with ARFID also have a co-occurring anxiety disorder, and they're also at high risk for other psychiatric disorders. According to BEAT, the UK's largest eating disorder charity, there has been a 7-fold increase in calls to their helpline related specifically to ARFID over the past 5 years. The variable service provision for this condition is partly due to the lack of research into treatment for it. The Scottish Government has provided BEAT with over £600,000 to provide a range of support for those impacted by an eating disorder, but performance still varies across health boards. There must be no complacency about that, And to help tackle this, a consultation was undertaken on the draft national specification for the care and treatment of eating disorders in Scotland to ensure that support and services meet the needs of those living with an eating disorder, wherever and whoever they are in Scotland. The responses to this consultation will be considered carefully. But when a person has an eating disorder of any kind, they need compassionate support with their mental and physical health. But their loved ones also need support, because this is a condition which impacts whole families, not just individuals. Indeed, it is close loved ones who are the first to pick up on the fact, very often, that their beloved family member has an eating disorder. And there's nothing worse than watching a loved one's mental and physical health deteriorate before their eyes from a condition which is often not well understood and, sadly, not always supported sufficiently either through prompt and sensitive treatment. I'm very glad that we are having this important debate once again in Eating Disorder Awareness Week into this condition and taking the opportunity to raise awareness of eating disorders in general, and this year of avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, into which we need much more research, and which I have to confess, Mr Chair, I knew almost nothing about before I started looking into it in preparation for this debate. But I hope debates like this will help those who are living with an eating disorder and their loved ones to feel less alone, because it can be a very isolating illness for individuals and their families, which can only compound the pain and fear that this condition very often generates.